Now we've talked about facts versus misconceptions and then worked our way through the grooming process. Now I want to transition us into a discussion of the what, an effective safety system. Knowing that that effective safety system possibly looks different depending on your type of program or the populations you serve. But the principle that comes along regardless of what populations or what your programs are is we cannot recognize this risk visually. We must understand this risk behaviorally, which is why the grooming process of the preferential offender is critical and foundational for the type of fence we build. Earlier, diagnostically, I asked you, what do you do to protect children from sexual abuse? Hopefully you made that list and hopefully you've had the opportunity to evaluate your own preparedness. But I told you the question we're going to ask is, what should I do to protect the children in my care? And the answer is, from Ministry Safe and Abuse Prevention System standpoint, it's a 5-part safety system. Sexual abuse awareness training, skillful screening, appropriate criminal background check, tailored policies and procedures, and monitoring and oversight. Let me walk through each of these quickly in the form of a list. Then I want to show you what this looks like in function. Sexual abuse awareness training. That's your foundational piece. Now, for those of you who have been paying attention thinking, now wait a minute, you said that grooming was the key. I would still tell you, you're right. The sexual abuse awareness training is the training that provides information about grooming. So here's what makes a sexual abuse awareness training effective and foundational. It's a training that covers these 7 things. Now, before I mention these 7 things, if part of what you already do in preparation for or to protect children from sexual abuse is employee training, I would just ask you to evaluate your training. Does it include these 7 elements? Facts versus misconceptions, abuser characteristics, the grooming process, common grooming behaviors, peer-to-peer sexual abuse, the importance of reporting, and the impact of abuse on a child. Now that's the core and the fundamental pieces of a sexual abuse awareness training, which makes it an effective foundation to this 5-part safety system. Now, if you're doing everything else on this list, but not doing the sexual abuse awareness training, we've missed it, all right? So that is the critical piece. And it has a lot more value when we start talking about not just the what, but the how, and I'll point those out in a minute. Let's go to the next item on this list, skillful screening. Now, not just screening, but to skillfully screen. Now, what do I mean to skillfully screen? First of all, let's talk about screening. What is screening? Well, here's the big idea. The best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. See, your screening is your opportunity to gather information about someone's past behavior to determine what they are likely to do in the future. So if you want to hire a teacher, for example, a Greek teacher, what do you need to know? Well, I need to know, do you know Greek and can you teach it, right? So screening is gathering information about one's past. In the context of child sexual abuse, what you're trying to do is gather information about someone's past to determine, are they likely to do inappropriate things in the future? Now, most organizations are not screening. And to the extent they are screening, it's really only related to fitness for purpose, not child safety. What do I mean by that? I recall being at a conference 10 or 11 years ago where I was the keynote speaker presenting to a bunch of school administrators. And I remember them being upset about having to listen to a lawyer right before lunch about child sexual abuse. But I asked them these diagnostic questions, telling them I'll end early if you already know what I know. So I asked them, how many of you in your large schools are using an application before you hire someone? Everyone raised their hand, okay? So I asked them, okay, reference checks. How many of you before you hire someone at your school perform the reference checks? All 450 people raised their hand. Okay, before you hire someone, how many of you do an interview before you hire a candidate? Everybody in the room raised their hand. It's like, now that's awesome. Now let's go back to your application. How many of you on your application have questions designed to elicit high-risk responses from a preferential offender? It's like, wow, nobody. Okay, your reference checks. That's some good third-party information right there. How many of you are asking those references for information designed to elicit high-risk responses about a preferential offender? Nobody. Okay, your interview. I mean, look, I know if you're going to hire a science teacher, you want to know if they can light a Bunsen burner without burning their face. Okay, that's called fitness for purpose. I'm interested in child safety. How many of you on your interview questions have questions designed to elicit high-risk responses from a preferential offender? It's like, nobody. Okay, how many of you know what the high-risk indicators are for the male preferential offender? Or type 1 or type 2 female preferential offender? Okay, so now everybody's shocked. It's like, people, we wasted 15 minutes. Let's get going. So we spent about an hour and 45 minutes walking through how each of these screening elements had a different role, how each of them had to ask questions designed to gather the information about high-risk indicators, but then also to teach them what are the high-risk indicators, so you're not just gathering them, not knowing it. Now, here's the upside downside. The upside for my schools is they already had the systems in place. All they had to do is modify their forms, get training in understanding high-risk indicators, and 90 days later, my schools were well-oiled machines. Most of my organizations don't have the systems built. And to the extent they have systems built, it's only for the people they pay. And it's usually only an application. Okay? And to that extent, it's related to fitness for purpose or just some documents we have to have in place to be able to pay you. Okay, so for most of my child-serving organizations, there's a lot of work to be done on the screening side, which includes the applications, reference checks, interview, making sure it's eliciting the high-risk indicators, but also a training and understanding what are those high-risk indicators. I'll say a little bit more about that rather than just trying to alarm people and say there's no hope for you. There's a training that we can provide called skillful screening training. If you've heard this and understand that's what your need is, that is the next step you need to take. Now, the next item on this list, appropriate criminal background checks. Now, a criminal background check, to be fair, is a part of the screening process. Now, I've broken it out because I've had people answer too many times when I asked them, are you screening? They say, yes, we do criminal background checks. All right, I'll spot you that. I just want to make sure that we're not missing the applications, reference checks, and interview. But when we talk about the criminal background check, that's the one element that most of my organizations are employing, but they know very little about. Okay? So from this standpoint, just know it makes the list. And the qualifier there is an appropriate criminal background check, knowing that you might run a deeper check on the people that you can't be wrong about. Now, the next thing on the list is tailored policies and procedures. In other words, policies and procedures that are tailored. What do I mean by that? See, it needs to be a glove that fits your hand. If you're not the Boy Scouts of America, then don't use the Boy Scouts policies. Your policies should be rooted in the grooming process and be a glove that fits the hand of your program. And then finally, monitoring and oversight. That's the lawyer way of saying we have to do what we say we're doing. And at Ministry Safe and Abuse Prevention System, we help organizations accomplish that through an online control panel that creates a framework to make sure that your safety system is trackable and sustainable. So let me take this list because I really don't want to list shame anyone in saying, well, I don't like your list, you should take mine. I just truly want you to understand this is the fence you build and it needs to be related to this particular risk, the preferential offender. Here's the way that I would tell you this works in function. All right, so there's the safety system in list form, but here's a diagram which is helpful in understanding how the safety system works. Okay, so here is a depiction of an applicant, and on the other side of the diagram is what I call the sheep pen. That's our program. That's where my kids are gathered in whatever capacity. Now that line that separates them is what I call the sheep pen gate. So if you can imagine the idea that in leadership, in administration, you stand in front of the sheep pen gate and nobody has access to that sheep pen unless we've done work on the front side to determine, does that person have wolf-like qualities? I don't want to know they're a wolf by seeing them eat one of my sheep. It's important to point out some of your safety system happens on the front side of your sheep pen gate. Some of your safety system happens on the back side of your sheep pen gate. So the list falls down in function like this. On the front side of the sheep pen gate, there's your skillful screening, broken down into application, reference check, interview. There's your criminal background check. And there's also your awareness training. Now, on the skillful screening, there's a training that we provide called a skillful screening training I'm going to show you how you can access that at the end of this particular training, but I just want you to make some inventory if you need to of the types of training you're going to need to get to where you have the effective and appropriate fence in place given how a preferential offender would operate in your type of program. Now, in the criminal background check, now, there's a lot of mystery and voodoo related to criminal background checks that most organizational leaders just don't understand. Okay, there's another training that we've completed called Criminal Background Checks, Removing the Mystery. Maybe that's a place where you need to invest some time because a lot of my organizations don't understand some of the things like plea down offenses, stair-step offenses, things related to a sexual abuser and this criminal background check resource. Now, the awareness training is on the front side of the sheep pen gate in this diagram. Now, some people will push back and say, now, wait a minute, Greg, I don't want to train anybody until I actually hire them and go through this onboarding system and orientation. I would tell you, don't miss the opportunity to have a person with ill intent self-select out of your applicant pool. Let me give you an example of how that might work. Let's say that at the organization in which I serve young people, somebody comes to that organization and says, hey, I'd love to volunteer some of my time with middle schoolers. And my organization's going to tell you, well, that's terrific. We always need help in middle school. I'll tell you what, I'm going to need you to fill out this application. Now, if that person responds by saying, no, wait a minute, I just want to volunteer. Oh, I know. We're really careful about making sure that we bring only those people that are appropriate into this particular program, including those people that are volunteers. Now, if that person gets that application and decides it's easier to volunteer somewhere else and leaves, beautiful, let them leave. They walked up, they wanted to know how hard it was to get a name tag here. They saw that there was a fence, the correct fence. Let's say that they even read that application and realized there were questions on that application designed to elicit high-risk indicators from a preferential offender, and the preferential offender will know that. If that person takes your application and leaves, that is a win. They walked up, they saw your fence, recognized it for what it was, and left. It worked. It was a visual deterrent. Now, say it goes a little further than that. Say that person says, oh, okay, well, I'll fill out that application. My organization would also tell you, well, I'm going to send you an online sexual abuse awareness training link. And when I see on my control panel that you've completed that training, let's set up a time for an interview. So let's say that person drops back and views that sexual abuse awareness training. What that person's immediately going to understand is that everybody in that sheep pen who has a name tag has also received this training. So that everybody in that sheep pen has eyes to see and ears to hear that process of grooming this person intends to engage in that sheep pen. So everybody's ready for it, they're watching for it, and they not only have eyes to see, but a mouth to speak. So if this applicant has ill intent, then completes the training, what do I want that person to do? Again, self-select out. I'll never know that you left, but we just don't ever chase applicants. All right. So on the front side of the sheep pen gate, the awareness training is a very effective way to communicate in advance. These are what information is being discussed and disseminated in this sheep pen related to the grooming process. All right. Give that person a chance to self-select out, especially if after you've heard this or you take the skillful screening training and realize our screening is not ready. We need to make some changes so that those eyes that we're using to determine whether someone has wolf-like qualities are not very good eyes yet. So if you still don't have the eyes that you need to see wolf-like qualities, the awareness training is a good additional barrier to put in place prior to someone coming into the sheep pen. Once you've done your due diligence, that's the front side of the sheep pen gate, and you see no wolf-like qualities, that person moves into the sheep pen. Now your policies and procedures take over, because your policies and procedures is that document which describes what is and is not appropriate behavior in that sheep pen. From shepherd to sheep and sheep to sheep, which is your peer sexual abuse. Knowing that there are some limitations on other safety system elements that can address that risk, training and policies and procedures in combination with the eyes to see, that's what's going to solve that problem. Appropriate supervision from trained sets of eyes. But in this sheep pen, you'll see that policies and procedures and awareness training appear together. And the principle there is awareness training and policies always go together. Because here's what we understand. Usually there are people that are rule followers like me, And there are non-rule followers like my wife. Now, my wife is excellent with young people, but here's what my wife will tell you. As a non-rule follower, when you give me policies and procedures, they're merely suggestions which may or may not apply to her depending on her mood and her outfit. Right? So for my wife, who's excellent with young people, as a non-rule follower, what she will tell you is, you've got to give me the training before you give me the policies, because she must understand the why before you ask her for the what, especially if you're submitting policies and procedures to that person would bring about change, bring about things that are inconvenient, bring about things that person's not accustomed to doing before. You've got to give that person an understanding of the why before you ask them for the what. So awareness training and policies and procedures always go together. And the reason why the awareness training appears on the backside of the sheep pen gate as well is for it to truly work as a deterrent. We can't just start training those people that come in. We must train everybody within our sheep pen so that we truly do have the eyes to see, ears to hear, and the mouths to speak, and people that will understand the policies and procedures that we've submitted to them. Now what I want to start doing is transitioning not just into the what of the safety system, but kind of do this as like a left pedal, right pedal of what and how, because if I give you a what that's not possible, then I've wasted your time and discouraged you. So what I want to do is show you now that this is what an effective fence looks like based upon the grooming process of the preferential offender. Here's an effective safety system. Here's how you can get your hands on some of those tools so we can discuss what and how. The sexual abuse awareness training, that's your foundational piece. I've shared with you what it needs to cover to make it an effective sexual abuse awareness training, not just a indicators training or a reporting training. Must talk about the grooming process, common grooming behaviors, and peer-to-peer sexual abuse. And we also provide that training to staff and volunteers. Everyone who wears a name tag is my recommendation. Frankly, if you have the ability, train your parents as well. It's a great messaging to the people that are parents of those that you serve, something along the lines of, hey parents, we realize in taking this training to make us effective at serving your children, that it actually made us better parents. And we wanted to make it available to you as well. So start to change the culture. And what you're going to do is get multiple sets of eyes, because that actually is what's going to make a difference to solve this problem just beyond our programs. Also, the training needs to be periodically refreshed. There are some different laws that are arising that are starting to mandate when that needs to be done. We recommend repeating the sexual abuse awareness training every 2 years. And to issue the certificates of completion and create a circumstance where you can archive that. Keep that material. There's other trainings that I can provide you about safety system archiving, but just it's important to keep the records of the things that you've done to protect children from sexual abuse. So in terms of the awareness training, it's helpful at allowing applicants with ill intent to self-select out. It also teaches our staff and volunteers the grooming process. It creates multiple watchtowers. It dovetails with our code of conduct, and it's critical for policy implementation. And we're also starting to see this is one of the fundamental pieces that insurance carriers are beginning to require for applications for insurance or renewal of coverage.